Alrighty then. Let's
All right.
kick this thing off. Day 65 of the quarantine, I'm pretty sure.
The best image I saw was like today, March 97th.
Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous. I'm kind of getting used to it a little bit, but I'm not. My first 2 weeks, I was really doing the stress eating thing, and then I just made a bet with, to pay at $250 every time I have a day where I go over my calories, and that's worked out so far. So
Nice. You're not in the red for that?
not in the red. Nope. I'm just gonna be doing these little adjustments, one thing at a time. The things about life that are just annoying, in quarantine mode, but lots of FaceTime, lots of Zoom calling with people and friends and video games, playing Witcher.
Nice.
Witcher is awesome. You got a Switch.
I did.
Have you been playing?
No. Katie plays Animal Crossing. She doesn't
Apparently,
really,
along with the rest of the internet.
Yeah, she's like, I don't understand why people like this game so much.
I never played it back in the day, but I know people were obsessed with it.
Wait, back in the day, so it's not a new game?
It's a new game, but it was originally an N64 game for sure.
Oh, okay.
That's why everyone knows about it already.
I see
And,
that. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I never played it, so I don't really know it. I almost feel like I should have gotten a light. I have a Switch, but I have not plugged it into a single TV yet.
Oh, my brother-in-law brings it over for Christmas every year, and we plug it into the TV, and the whole family plays. We played like Overcooked this last Christmas. We played Mario Kart, and it's so much fun.
Yeah,
It's super fun. So I would recommend.
the big one.
Yeah,
I figured
the
even
TV
if there was one time a year where I use it to plug in, it's worth it, and it's pretty comfortable. But I can imagine the light would be pretty sweet. And I just haven't plugged it in because for me, like I have a PS4, and if I want to sit down and play for an hour, I'm going to turn that on and play Witcher because I'm going to get really into it. But the benefit of this is like I just pick it up. It's right here. And so if I'm waiting on something or I just need a little break, like instead of Twitter, I can just do a lap or a race in Mario Kart in like 8 minutes or something. And I'm just like getting 3 stars on every map. It's awesome. It's super fun.
Nice.
I mean, I'm working hard 15 hours a day.
Well, no, my comment was going to be like, how does it, feel to live in the most expensive part of the country and sit inside and play video games all day?
Yeah, dude, it's so true. It's funny, man, because I was listening to that econ talk about like zoning and rents and stuff. And he says this funny thing. He's like, these places like Chelsea and New York City and Paris and San Francisco, they're really like museums for like wealthy people, right? And I'm like sitting here like, yeah, there's this building down the street where these people live in like $30 million apartments. And he's talking about how like, yeah, all these people like pay these exorbitant rents. And the zoning keeps out new supply, so the rents stay high. And then these people just have like these neighborhoods in like the most dense, beautiful, desirable place in the whole world to live. And then they pay for high housing, but they don't really have to pay for the fact that they don't pay for that museum aspect of it in any real sense because they're not paying for the opportunity cost, let's say, that a building developer would come in any other part of the world. I mean, there's an absolutely massive opportunity cost if you could actually develop these places and add more supply, right? It's a lot of these neighborhoods like to keep people out in a sense because they like this quaint, like West Village, Chelsea vibe or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And then of course now it's like spring and it's beautiful and this freaking virus is like stealing the best time in New York from us. But I do get to go on walks. I go on like 2-3 walks a day around the hood, and
Nice.
Everyone's doing the same thing. But there's not many people out there. It's good. But it is kind of funny. It's like, well, actually, so I have a buddy of mine in this building who like bailed. He like had his lease renewal coming up, and he's like, he thinks New York is going to be like this for like 10 months. And I mean, that sounds pretty crazy to me. He was making all sorts of predictions, but he was like, he basically said that. He's like, I'm not going to sit around and pay all this money for this expensive thing and just stay inside. For some reason, that doesn't bother me. I still love my apartment. Just make the best of it.
Yeah. There you
It'll
go.
be over. It'll be over. It'll be over in a couple weeks, I think, or mostly. I'm hoping. Yeah, man. How you been? What you been working on?
Pretty good. Doing a Gatsby app. Just plugging away at that. Yeah. Pretty exciting.
Yeah. I was thinking about this because we are working on this Gatsby site, and I was like, it's also like learning about React and these smaller sites, and then starting to figure out about the ecosystem and the players and the people that they teach, what they teach in it, and it's like kind of like what you were saying, where it's like, what does real advice look like? What does a real app look like in a bigger app, and what are the actual pain points? So I was trying to think like how to do like R&D on that, and it's hard when you're just working on. It doesn't even happen with Ember. I mean, if you think about like the pain points we've had with Ember, or like the ones we know about, not necessarily with Ember, but more with like building a big app with Ember. The way you know those things is from our experience building big apps when we were working full time and had to solve like real nasty business problems,
Yeah. Yeah. I think the R&D is get a job.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's just, you need the constraints, like the business problems. You need the constraints of the business and to see how those trade-offs get made in a real big app.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's interesting. But yeah, we shipped. I don't know if we talked about this last week, but we shipped the Mirage domain modeling training and then the Tailwind one. I don't know. Had the Tailwind one come out by last time we did this? I don't think so. Actually,
I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's
yeah. So we'll put a link to those. And those are our EmberConf trainings, which went virtual this year because the conference was virtual, and so they're on YouTube now. And yeah, that was fun. And
you've gotten a lot of good feedback on them too, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an hour and a half long, so the second one I was better about chopping it up, at least with the outline to point out the different things. But it would be fun to turn that content into like 10-minute videos that are more like suitable for YouTube,
Nice.
But yeah, just lots of little tips and tricks for each thing, kind of working on it. And we've been live streaming on the Inspector, and that was also the test bed for that. And man, that was fun. So I've used the Inspector like 3 or 4 times in the last 2 days answering questions. Because I subscribe to Mirage.js/Discuss, which is like a repo, and also the main repository, and then like the tag on Stack Overflow, and then we have a Discuss. And so I just try to answer those if I have them in my email every so often. And man, this is going to be a game changer for me, and also just for helping people learn. Basically, if you haven't seen it yet, we have this inspector where you can paste in like a Mirage config, like everything about it. It's like a server definition with the models, the schema, the serializers, the data, the routes, and then you can make requests to it. And so if someone is trying to get Mirage to work a certain way and they can't, well, now I can just send them a link to the inspector and paste in the code, and it just show it to them, and they don't have to git clone and check out anything and yarn nothing. I mean, it's amazing. It's frictionless.
Yeah.
And right now the only thing is like visit this PR build and paste in this config, but eventually, if we can have it where we can just share the config,
Oh, we will.
We definitely will. How will we do that, by the way?
I am currently exploring serverless databases to store all this.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I want this to be something that we build with. Well, right now I want this to be something that we build without setting up a backend or anything like that. I want to see how far we can get.
Totally.
I think, by the way, I think these tools look super promising.
Awesome.
Also, the data is relatively simple.
Yeah.
It's a Mirage config.
Yeah.
Right, and then maybe
Other
maybe
files
there's or like there's a notion of like multiple requests and which one
right.
is but right now it's just a server definition.
Nice.
So I think it's we can get there.
What would it be like? What would it use to store the data?
So first up, I have Amplify. I posted something on Twitter about what is the best. I don't even know what term to use to describe this. I want a database that I can talk to directly from JavaScript. And so there's
like
no backend. There's no but Mongo I have to set up.
It's a unmanaged thing.
So it's not it's it's probably like falls within, if you imagine like a Venn diagram, it probably falls within serverless, right? Because that's just how these things are typically set up, which generally means no SQL. So the first, anyway, I got a bunch of feedback. The first one that I want to explore is Amplify. This is like Amazon's offering that gives you a database you set up in AWS, and then you can query it from JavaScript with GraphQL. So we're going to see how that goes.
Cool.
There's a whole bunch of them.
Cool. Now we would have to pay for this, but the idea with serverless is that it's not like, presumably it wouldn't be as expensive. Like Brian made this point on the podcast that he was talking about, and I actually thought it's easy to hear what he says and like dismiss it, but I actually think it's a valid point because like he was like, oh yeah, then you just have like this hobby Heroku plan that's like $7 a month, even if you're not using it. I actually have like 3 of these things and I pay like $20-something a month for it.
We don't have any of that. It's not, yeah. What are you talking about?
I had this reminder app that I built with my brother and I use it for like 3 years now. And it just sends me an email like on a regular basis of like different reminders I've scheduled. And there's no reason I should be paying $7 a month for it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If it was serverless, it's literally only being used for me and my brother, but we just don't want to shut it off because we actually use it. It should be costing like pennies a month or something like that.
Yep.
And so anyways, it's just kind of interesting to think like it seems like a much better fit for this sort of thing.
It also like just even we could say like that doesn't matter. You could actually plan your capacity, right? Well, I guess no, I'm not going to say that, but
even if you could,
like, well, I guess I don't know where I'm going. I actually want to back out of that statement and say that like teams are bad at planning their capacity.
Yeah.
So how many times have you worked on a project where like you set up some crazy AWS VPC whole network, and then it turns out you don't even use let's simplify that. Even with Heroku, when we set up our Heroku instances of like 2 web servers and 2 workers, like we're not using all that.
Yeah, totally.
We're not using close to all that.
Yeah, you're guessing, and then also like there's
and
parts
you guess
of it
at the beginning of the project.
Yeah, totally. And you can guess in the wrong directions too. Like there can be parts that are the bottleneck because you start to server side render fast boot and it takes a ton of memory, and turns out what you need is more workers as opposed to more database servers or something like that. And so yeah, having it just kind of scale on its own was pretty cool idea.
For me, I want to be clear for like the Mirage Inspector stuff though. Although that price, the $7 Heroku nodes that we have that are just going to sit there forever. That's not really why I'm exploring this. That's not a pain point. The pain point is, ever since we started building SPAs, every year that goes by, the back end feels like more and more glue code.
Yeah.
And it just like, I finished the SPA and then it's like, okay, now I need to think about like, how am I going to deploy this?
Yeah.
Even stuff like going in and setting up like CNAME records for like the front end to talk to the back end. It's just all that stuff is a pain. So if I could just have a JavaScript client that could talk directly to a database, that seems like it eliminates all this easy stuff, but it's going to make me feel a lot more productive.
Totally. I mean, basically it's something like Firebase, right?
Yeah. And I'm not dismissing Firebase. Firebase is definitely on the table for this.
Yeah. I wonder what Rich does with Svelte. I mean, you log in when you are on the Svelte REPL, and he might even use like GitHub Gist.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, we should look. I know. Like,
what would that look like?
The problem with Gist, I think, is if you save Ember,
Twiddle
has this problem where if like when you talk to Gist, you need a key in there, and if you don't, you hit rate limits. And if you're in like an office environment, so this actually happens to us at WeWork, we'll get timed out from Gist.
But we could have a serverless function act as a reverse proxy.
Sure, we could, but I want to see like part of this for me that violates the statement that I started this off with, and we might end up there, right?
Yeah, because I
would like a JavaScript to
to back end. I mean, if we have to do a serverless function and it's like in an API folder right alongside the code, it feels a lot better to me. But there's no question that it complicates things.
Yeah. I try a serverless function, like the way like the Next puts serverless functions into its environment. That's a lot
more it's easier pill to swallow than a Rails. Yeah, exactly. To me, it's like, let's try something else.
This is more. I'm very much in like let's experiment and learn. So I want to like go to my ideal conclusion to start off, and then I'll probably the real world will come back and lay down some constraints.
Right. But no, it's a good opportunity to explore it. And also it's just like kind of, the root cause here is like, we're not actually happy with our stacks right now. Like that we're just not actually satisfied with our stack. Like if I had to start a new business, I wouldn't be happy with the stack that I would use. Right. So it's kind of like, maybe there's something out there that.
It's almost like I want to say too, like I don't know, like saying like you want to start a new business. There's so many trade-offs there.
Something like EmberMap, where we were 3 years ago.
Right.
To me, it feels like it's almost, we don't understand this stuff enough to know to make that kind of bet on this newer technology, which is much more pleasant to work with, but we don't understand and where the business risk is and the technology risk. Is this a startup that's going to, is Hasura a startup that's going to go out of business, it's not going to work anymore? Or is it an open source core that you'll be able to deploy yourself and therefore there's not as much risk or whatever? All that stuff, right? So, yeah. But if I had to make another SPA Rails backed thing, I would feel like I wouldn't be happy with that,
Wouldn't you almost want to just make a Rails app at that point?
Honestly, like, there's so many problems. Like for me, man, also like I think you're better with this than me, but like switching between JavaScript and Ruby, just the context switching for me is more expensive, alone, which is why when I would work on those features that involve the front end and the back end, I would just do it all in the front end against Mirage write tests and then kind of switch context and go implement the API routes and the interface and everything. And that made it much easier for me. But really, you want to be treating it as a whole app,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. They're not whole apps, no matter what we think of them as whole apps, but they're not. The context switch, the context switch is bad for me. I think it's a lot easier when you do Ruby first,
right,
and then you learn JavaScript later.
Right.
I think that it feels like so much busy work.
Yeah, it really does.
It's the busy work that's just, and yeah.
Next would be pretty cool, but it leaves a lot of, like, again, if we were in a position where we were literally starting like an EmberMap, going all in on Next, in some ways feels safe and in some ways feels risky.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Mr. Kool-Aid?
It's extremely risky. Building the Mirage Next stuff this last week, it's super fun. I like it. There's a lot I really like about Next, but I think it's just things that I happen to like. We don't know where Next is going to be in 3 years.
Or what it's like to build a real Next app, like a full
that's true. Yep.
Next app. There's something else I was going to say. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it'll come back to me. I had this note about SPAs on the web sucking.
Yeah, it's true.
Dude, if you go to, you know how like Safari has this, like, this will still record if I just minimize that, right? Like this is even on desktop. So you go to Safari and, when you click a link and then you click another link and you have this like swipe to back motion and it looks like that. It's like that page swiping animation thing, right?
Yep.
Just like on iOS, like you drag the end of the screen and it swipes back. And with an SPA, that's rendering from cache, but with a SPA, it's once it recognizes that like change state in the history in the router, it's going to re-render it, and so it just looks really bad. So any SPA you go on Safari mobile or even desktop and do that swipe back to back animation, it basically doesn't work. Or there's like a flicker. even if you go to iCloud.com on Safari, like Apple, iCloud.com on Safari on any device, because iCloud.com is an SPA, and you click the different apps and they do this cool fading SPA thing, but then you try to go back, you're just like violating the web in certain ways. I know we just talked about this, about embracing like what the web has to offer versus trying to compete with like native apps. But it was just like, I think I had just edited that podcast and I was uploading my training to YouTube, and YouTube Studio is like this new SPA. It's like the studio is like their rewritten thing. And like, man, I will say there are some things that are so nice about it. Like you drag a video in and it starts
better than it used to be. I just want to say that.
And it starts uploading and the progress bar is showing you that, and you can fill out the details and you can say publish now. And it's like, all right, your video's still uploading. Just keep this page open until it finishes. And there's a lot of stuff it does that wouldn't be possible without JavaScript. But I was like switching accounts from like EmberMap to Sam Selikoff or something like that. And it was so slow, and I just like refreshed because I just kept hitting this stuff where I'm like, I'm on a list of videos and I click a video and like I can see what the SPA is doing. It's like all the little gnomes are going to work to like unrender the rendered JavaScript, and like the memory's being freed up, and it's like a little fade out thing, and then it's trying to load it again. And I'm like, it's so bad, you know, I just almost want to command click on this just to get the actual video that I want to edit in a new tab. And then like Twitter did this thing where they fade in all their tweets now, and I was just like, what is going on with this? Like, just let the browser do it as fast as it can. It's going to be better. I don't know. I just still had this like cognitive dissonance internally, where it's like, on the one hand, there's so many stupid things we can't do when we just do server rendered stuff. There's just so many things. Like, I was thinking about this. No other application is built like this. Like, it's not even just native apps on your iPhone versus the web. It's like an app. When SPAs first came out and people were like, oh, look, it's like Gmail. Look what it enables. Like, you can re-render part of the UI without the whole thing. That's how every app ever works. Like, on your PlayStation, it's just, that is an app. That is how software works. And then like on the web, we have this really strange model where it's like you re-render the whole thing after every user interaction with a new string of HTML given to you from a server. And it's like, that's how the web was built. And so it's like you fight that a lot if you try to build it like an app. But we want to build apps because like that's just how all software goes. And that's why like Gmail is like a useful thing to have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot there. So let me have a speed round. So I think Safari and the back button, and Safari's back button embracing the web and not SPAs, like I get that. That's frustrating. I would hope that Safari would change that behavior. I don't think that's a reason to dismiss SPAs. You know, as far as like the YouTube thing, by the way, I saw you put a note that you wanted to talk about this on the podcast, and then I was in my, I don't know, Schwab or Fidelity account, and I had the same thing happen where like I did a transaction and it didn't show up on the screen. And I was like clicking around. And I was like, yeah, just hard reload. Command R.
Because you know what's going on in our head. You know the new data will be there when you refresh it. So
I think this goes back to, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think when you start an SPA, you think about it like a CRUD app. And I think it's very easy to, I think there's so many more states in the SPA.
Yeah.
That it's a lot harder to code. And we treat them, just from experience, we treat them like CRUD apps. Like I built this screen, it's done. I'm going to move on to the next screen, but we're not thinking about like the transitions between the two screens. Right. How if you enter from screen 1 and go to screen 2 is different from if you enter.
That's
from
really
screen
the
2.
thing. It's all the state and the ways you can get there, because it's not a route as an entry point. There's n entry points based on the other states of the app.
Yeah, and there are patterns to deal with this, but I think the way we build SPAs is the tooling is such that like we start talking about these patterns when we notice we have these problems. It's
because we're web developers and we've been making websites with like a hard reload mentality for a decade. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, 3 or 4 decades, but like us who are JavaScript hipsters or whatever, you know, the last whatever, that's where we came from. So it's like, it's a mismatch. But a bad SPA is so much worse than a server-side rendered app.
Yes.
So much worse. But there are a lot of bad SPAs out there.
if you think about the degree from like 0 to 100 that all the things that a server rendered app can get wrong.
Yes.
And then what is how much wider is the 0 to 100 for an SPA?
Yes. I mean, dude, GitHub shouldn't even be using turbo links. It really bothers me. Like, it has stale issues because of that. And that's because of JavaScript. Like, that's because of bad state management on the JavaScript side. So, like, you close an issue, and then it's not even when you click back. You can click.
But there's
there's a lot of there's a couple vectors that I keep running through. You close an issue or a PR, you merge something, and you go back to the list. And it's not even the back button. It's something that GitHub is doing. I actually think if you leave, I don't know if it's the browser cache interfering with it or not. I don't think it is. I think there's a bug.
Yeah, we've all noticed this. You close an issue, you go back, the issue count is still +1.
Yeah. You have to refresh it to get the latest list.
But this is a thing where, like, I think that when you're in CRUD app mentality, you're not thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because there are things where GitHub is deliberate about being a JavaScript app that's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
Like your test pass and the GitHub icon just changes to green. Yeah,
that's true.
Or like you're writing an issue and you accidentally close the window and you go back and the issue text is still there.
That's true. Good points.
You're writing an issue. You're looking at a PR and someone pushes new code and you immediately get a notification that says this PR has been updated. Click here to refresh.
Yeah.
So I think these are deliberate things that.
Good points, Toronto.
That they're
pulling me
thinking
back.
about.
You're pulling me out of the depths here, the abyss.
I'm hard.
Deep, man. I'm deep.
It's a lot harder because the way we think about CRUD apps, it doesn't apply.
Well, maybe that's why those isolated areas are so good, because they're actually given the respect and treatment they deserve, where it's like a mini application, like the WYSIWYG wizard in the YouTube studio that is so good, but it's like the rest of the app is it's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Or the labels on GitHub, like without JavaScript, that would suck. Apply a label or assign someone. Like you just start typing it and it pulls it up and it's like way better.
Yep. Kind of tying it back to how we started this. A lot of SPAs I've worked on have had bugs like this, and me being like a overconfident developer, I'm like, I can fix this. Like, I just need time. Like, I can totally fix all this. I can make this app perfect. But when you think of sorry, WhatsApp just went off and blew my ears out.
Yeah.
When you think of like the constraints of the business, the fact that sometimes we have to reload the page, that is way, way less important than getting this new feature, this new form built. And so I think the advice here is, like, if you're in a situation like that, maybe it's irresponsible to use an SPA.
Yeah, that's
SPAs,
interesting.
Like, they really need a lot of care.
Seems like you're making it seems like a bad reason to make an SPA almost every time. Or I guess the value has to be worth it, right? So like Gmail, or Google Calendar or Trello, or Figma. These are business cases that warrant an SPA and therefore warrant a business needs to. They warrant the business resources to actually build a proper SPA.
Right. SPA here is going to be difficult, but it's the only way we can solve this problem, and therefore there's going to be a massive reward for it.
Right. Versus an organization that's used to building Rails apps and is used to how long the product team is used to how long it takes to add a feature or 4 pages, and now you're building another back office app, but you're using SPA instead, and the team is like, why is it taking so long for like this one page with like a list of users and like for me to edit them?
Yeah.
It's sad to me that there's a trade-off.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's where like the idealist in me comes out and says that every app should be an SPA.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a framework problem. And, the fact that we can do things, big assumption here, but, you can imagine a world where an SPA can do everything a server rendered app can do, but not the opposite. You can't. Imagine. We can point to things that the SPAs can do that server rendered apps can't do.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, dude, for me, the threshold of is so low for how much JavaScript I need to write to feel like I'm just want to only write JavaScript, right? And I would be happy to make a Rails app, but as soon as I have to start adding JavaScript for like parts of it, I'm going to be like, I feel like I'm trying to build a UI and I am using like the wrong tool, and I should just be like JavaScript. I should just be using JavaScript because JavaScript is like a UI language, like fundamentally, and it's perfect for that.
It is unbelievably how fast you get to that point when working on a Rails app.
Yeah, I know.
Where it's like, this is just a CRUD app with a few forms and you're like, okay. And then 3 weeks into it, you're getting all these features that like, man, if I could just have used JavaScript, this would be so much easier. But I don't know. I think we tend to get focused on those features and how much easier it would be in JavaScript, and we lose, we're not thinking about the other stuff and how much easier it is in server render land.
Sure.
By the way, I'm still buying SPA stock. Right?
Sure.
I'm negative about it, but I'm buying it.
Totally. No, that's yep. I also think what's interesting is like, I think one of the big things that has driven JavaScript adoption in the last 5-10 years is probably like much bigger organizations where there's this front end and back end split, because there has to be, because the quality or complexity of the thing demands it. Like someone like me who's comfortable making a server, making a full stack app, I'm not going to be able to jump into a large organization and like optimize a database and like do indexing and stuff that's going to be like really hyper specific to a really larger complex organization. It's not going to be the best use of my skills, and so naturally these places are gonna specialize. And
by the way, that was a very nice way to describe office politics.
Wait, what do you mean?
I think that's why.
You're saying I'm giving way too much. Yeah, I'm giving way too much credit to the. You think, like, for example, like backend developers trying to like gatekeep their systems or something like that, or
I think it's just hard to. I think it's why you see like microservices and stuff like that. I think it's hard to have so many people working in one app, and when you can draw clean lines about, here's the front end, we change all this. Here's the back end, you change all this. It's a lot easier. I'm also being a little snarky. But
I was going to say, it's pretty cynical take
to hear.
And interesting. I mean, I've heard that before, of course. Isn't there some law about the architecture with your communication?
Conway's law?
Yeah.
Metcalfe's law? One of those. Your architecture imitates the way your company communicates.
Okay, but the logical end of that, of the cynical view, is like literally the reason like I was a front end developer anywhere is because like it's what you're saying is like most organizations or all organizations that do this actually shouldn't do this, have this split. Is that kind of, would you agree with that? Or even many organizations that have the split shouldn't?
Yeah.
To me, there's like real benefits to it.
Or if there is a split, the line isn't correctly drawn.
It's not front end, back end. It should be like by vertical or whatever.
So one of the examples that I always think about is like your back end team is generally responsible for like the database and the API endpoints.
Mm-hmm.
So they generally design everything and then tell the front end developers, here's how you get your data. But I think this is wrong, because if you think about it, your front end developer is the one that's building the page. So your front end developer is a person that knows all the data that's needed for the page. Yeah. So they should be the one that's actually designing the query and the data. But that's like a hard thing to make. It's a hard argument to make, because front end developers they do design and colors and CSS. They don't do database, which so this is why I think
that's
a
why
lot of this is wrong. And
interesting. But I guess what I'm saying is like, why did JavaScript and front end become such a big thing in the last 5-10 years? There is something about the split, technologically speaking, that allows you to move very, very fast. To have consultants come in and build your front end and, just power it with your existing back end. And now you've like offloaded 70% of the problem. And I think bigger organizations that can work like that, they do so because of business pressure. I mean, of course, there's a political thing, but that's not.
Yeah, I don't think that's the main driver. That's not the reason that JavaScript became popular.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, is because my whole point of making this argument, or just this line of thinking that I've had recently, is like, if it's true that bigger organizations, the legitimate needs, let's just set aside the cynicism for a second. The legitimate needs of bigger organizations have driven the need for specialization. Think like a Netflix, think like a recommendations engine, having to literally be an engine with its own fault tolerance, percentages and uptime. And it can't just be, a SQL query made by Active Record in a Rails template. Like, it is an engine. If it fails, the rest of the page still needs to be able to render. All of these things are going to drive specialization and separation of technology and teams along technology lines. And in those situations, like, it doesn't actually matter that the separation and the hard boundaries are a feature, and they let the teams work more productively independently. But when you bring that architecture back to a two-person team, the hard boundaries add a lot of friction, unnecessary friction, and they leave us in a spot where we don't feel happy with our tool sets. So my point is
I agree with everything you're saying, but I think sometimes those boundaries are good. Like, those boundaries enforce a good way of thinking, or a good way of you talked about, like, fault tolerance. Like, maybe just thinking about those boundaries is how you get that fault tolerance.
But do you need that when you're starting a brand new app, or is it better to have a Rails-like experience, like a monolithic experience? And I'm not even saying that there's a trade-off. I'm just saying, I'm saying that the reason that there's a gap in that people like us maybe say, like, we're not happy with our stack right now, is because we know the productivity of a Rails-like environment, and we don't have that right now with the tools that we're used to going heavy on front-end JS. But it doesn't mean that there couldn't exist one. Like,
correct.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's just that if my premise is true, that the driving force behind the separation of tools is from the bigger companies that have needed the specialization, you're not going to see a monolithic solution for the little man starting out a new project from the bigger companies. They don't have an incentive. There's no reason for Netflix to set up a situation where they can use their microservice architecture, but it can be easy for one person to make a whole app starting from zero. You see what I'm saying? Like, React as a library is great in this environment where you just need a front end and you're going to be talking to an existing API, let's say. But if you have to make an app like EmberMap, or just a new SaaS app that you want to start, or an inspector with a backend, just React isn't going to get you there, because you also need to make an API. And so now you're making two apps, and like, making two apps is worse than making one app when you're starting out. No question about it. But it's not when you're in a situation where you actually want two apps because one app is causing you problems, which is a Netflix scale issue. You see what I'm saying? So I just think that.
And you're saying that the main driver of this is because all the JavaScript frameworks that we see today are driven by big organizations.
I think my guess is, like, that's a big part of why JavaScript has become popular, because there's one cynical view that's like the communication thing. There's another cynical view that's like, no, the reason people started using React and JavaScript is because it's like cool and new. But like, I totally don't believe that. I believe that there were real problems that middle to large size companies were facing, problems of their existing architecture that they ran up against, where, they could have solved it with like doing what DHH and Basecamp do, but this was an alternative solution that maybe letting a team focus on just the front end with a tool like React to make them feel more productive, make them be more productive, actually solve certain issues where, like, the backend team was causing it, the deploy was taking a week just to change some CSS or something like that, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if I get this. I also think there's a lot of companies out there that they're small companies and they have the same mentality. Like, React lets them solve a problem. And it's about solving that problem, not about the separation.
I'm not saying that small companies shouldn't use React or build SPAs or go heavy on JavaScript. I absolutely think that a lot of the problems that the more distributed architecture solve for the bigger companies can also come up with smaller companies. What I'm saying is, because they came up with bigger companies, who they were never worried about like this one app conceptual approach, because the one app is what was killing them to begin with. And so whereas we want right now, like, for example, building the inspector with a backend, or just a stack for a new app, we want a one app approach. that brings the benefits of the separation, but still pieces them together in a nice way. And again, I don't think there's anything about the architecture, just like we're seeing with Next.js, you know, the new version that lets you have the server-side query right alongside your front-end component. Like, that's an example of what I'm talking about. So, yeah, it's just interesting. And it's also like, part of me is like, well, I need to spend time with Next because I'm interested in it. But like, I know a lot of the Next architecture and the use cases are being driven by like bigger companies too, right? If someone were to focus on like the Redwood JS thing, right? If that was going to be a focus for like this more like monolithic approach using the newer modern tools, but it's like, is it being designed or is it being extracted? And like, I'm a big believer in like tools being extracted. So it's just kind of interesting, right? I don't remember why we started talking about this. There was a point. There was like a point at the end I wanted to make.
I mean, maybe, that, you know, in the back of my head, as you were talking, one of my questions is going to be like, so do we need Rails Basecamp to design our next JavaScript framework? That small company that, you know.
Yeah, that's using the modern tools that we like, that uses JavaScript, so you're not limited when you want to build those interactions that are inevitably going to need it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know what it's going to look like either, but I guess the reason I was thinking a lot about this is because it feels like to me sometimes people are talking past each other when they're talking about this stuff. And you see like Dan Abramov talking about what APIs they're adding to support certain things in React and how they need to support these crazy things. You know, they worked on Relay. People talk about how Facebook was built. You know, we don't need to build our apps the way Facebook was built. We just need a simple way to do persistence. So it can feel like the more indie hacker groups of people who are 1 or 2 or 3 man shops versus the people working on at these bigger companies, building things like Relay or Falcor or whatever. All these things that are helping the bigger companies solve their problems, you know, to make the teams more efficient independently. They can talk past each other, but it doesn't feel like it has to be like that, you know. It's just like, yeah. So I don't know, just something I've been thinking about. It's definitely frustrating not to be happy with the stack. I mean, the last 2 or 3 side projects I worked on, I wrote with React and Hasura, and it was a dream. But those are not real apps because I just haven't taken the time to learn how to do auth or like send an email yet. And I think there's good answers to all those things. But again, it's like, it doesn't feel the same as like learning Rails because it's like, it feels like one piece of it.
There's a weird thing too, where I think if someone hired us to build an app, we wouldn't be able to just go build it in Hasura without explaining the risks and the trade-offs to them.
Right. Right. And it feels different in that sense from a Rails app, even though in Rails you do have to host it you're going to have, you can say, yeah, this relies on a Postgres server and a Redis server, and you have to do that in some way or another. And maybe you end up using Heroku. And so you end up making something that they have lock into Heroku to do it for this point, but it feels less risky than saying Hasura.
Yeah. Oh, and it should. I mean,
it is less risky. It's way less risky.
So we're in a weird spot where like the stable, safe solution we're not satisfied with, and the new thing that we're excited by,
we don't fully understand yet.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe it's like we actually have to like build an app.
Yeah.
And like not just like build an app in a weekend, but like actually like build an app over the course of a year.
Right. I know. Yeah. I mean, I built those apps in like 2.5 hours. It was awesome. And I still use one of them. The other one I don't use because my nutrition tracking scheme didn't work very well. But yeah, I just don't like, it's tough. We don't like making compromises, but we're also like very conservative by nature in terms of like the tech that we like and use. But it's hard to go backward. It's hard to feel like you could go backwards, right?
Yeah.
Which is why like if I actually had to make a Rails app, I would be FOMOing so much about like the component models on the front end that I'm used to building with, you know,
yeah,
or whatever.
Yep.
But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. It would be fun to find a team that's like a couple years into a startup that has a good technical director or CTO or whatever, and kind of see how it went with like a modern stack. Just see what they people who were like us in that situation a couple of years ago, see what they did, who were comfortable. Like, yeah, there's just so many different things in Prisma. I'm hearing a lot of awesome stuff about. Seems like it might be up our alley in terms of like the philosophy. Apollo, who knows about all this stuff.
I think there's a little bit of, these tools are new. There's a lot of uncertainty about them because they're new. Not even because like abstractly they're wrong. Let's just not even have that on the table. I feel like it's almost like flipping a coin. It's like, yeah, I chose Redux, and it's no longer pop. It didn't work out. I don't think that's like, or someone else saying like, oh, I didn't use Redux. Instead, I used this. Instead, I used GraphQL. I don't. Yeah.
Dude, GraphQL came out in 2015, by the way. It's 5 years old.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt as a Rails developer 5 years into its life?
Yeah, I mean,
you probably felt way more confident in Rails on year 5. That was like in 2007 or 2008 or something, and it would have been like Rails
was like 04.
2 or 3 or something.
Rails came out in like 04, but for the first year it's unfair to say it came out in 04 because people weren't using it in 04. It was
Didn't Rails 10 years celebrate version 5 or whatever? So 5 years in would have been what, version 2 or 3, something like that?
Yeah, 3. Yeah, 5 years in would have 3.
So how did Rails feel around version 3? Solid, like solid tech, like everyone was using it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, Rails 3 was awesome. Yeah,
not like, I mean,
I don't know if these. I mean, this might just be a cheap out from me, but Rails was not the whole idea of MVC frameworks did not come along with Rails. I feel like GraphQL
is a paradigm shift.
Yeah, where Rails was a huge improvement on existing.
Does sound like an easy out, by the way, but yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. It would be more like whatever's going to come out between now and the next 5 years. That's like putting a layer on top of GraphQL and adding a ton of conventions, kind of thing.
I guess one of the reasons I'm saying this too is like the first Rails app I wrote, like I didn't understand Rails, but I knew exactly what I was doing because I had been writing MVC frameworks in PHP.
Symfony or whatever.
Yeah. I knew what models and controllers were. I knew how to think of templates. I mean, of course I made a mess of Rails APIs. I'm not saying it was like a perfect Rails app.
Sure.
But like the first GraphQL queries I wrote just had I'm just like throwing mud at the wall.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just like, oh, cool. Look at this data.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. There's not a ton of developers out there with years and years of experience with this stuff. It feels like it's kind of settled down in the last few years versus like 2015 for sure.
Yeah.
When a lot of this stuff was changing quickly.
And every year that goes by is more important for GraphQL's longevity.
Yeah. Yep. Amplify is that use GraphQL?
Yeah. Yep.
Do all these things use GraphQL?
I think so.
Firebase doesn't.
Right. Firebase doesn't. Hasura does. Amplify does. I think
Amplify does. Oh, Fauna does too.
Yeah. I think it's nice that they have an easy communicate. That they can leverage GraphQL for this. I guess so. Maybe it's like the easy choice.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Very interesting, man. I really want. I wish I just had like $1 million and we could just. I guess that would be a bad thing to make an app without constraints, but it's more like to justify building a real app with this stuff and like figure out what we like about the different tools. What was I going to say? It's interesting that I'm excited the next time we have an opportunity to make our crazy useResource hook and to re-implement like the things we love about Ember data with the React hooks, because the first time we tried to do that, we were trying to use React state to store our cache. And then since I did this live stream with SWR, which is Zeit's data fetching library, and they just use like module. They just use like modules global for like their cache.
Nice.
I still don't know how I feel about this, but like maybe it's just because I'm so used to like DI and Ember, which is to me is nice because it's like if you have singleton state, it's injected. Okay, that was really weird. I literally just bumped my desk and Lana Del Rey started playing. You know what happened? I think my watch bumped it. That was really weird. Kind of
is
freaky,
it a JavaScript front end?
I'm used to Ember's dependency injection, and when you have singleton state, it is injected somewhere. So if you have a module in an Ember app, it's like a definition of a static thing. It's like exports like a class definition or a function, and those aren't like stateful. They're like blueprints.
Wait, why? Wait. They can be stateful, right? Can't you?
They can be. What I'm saying is like if you have a service or a controller or something, the thing you export in the file is a definition, and then when the Ember app boots up, there is a DI system that creates and constructs all of those things and sets up their state, and that way you're never making stateful code in a global scope or outside of the DI system, so that you have a way to easily reset the state. For example, if you want to throw away an app after each test, and so that's like a good. That's just like how my brain has done that for so long, and it feels like such a clean way to do things, that the idea of like doing like const cache equals object right there, like alongside my import statements and not in like the body of an export, but it's just like it's right there. So like whenever Webpack happens to evaluate this module, like you can export like const cache equals object. Someone else can like import cache and just like start adding data to it from another file that's like concatenated to it at some point that you don't even know about.
You like that the Ember's DI system gets you, like what you said, think of the blueprint, and you're exporting classes, not instances.
Yeah.
And then you let the system turn those classes into instances, where we're using like JavaScript modules that makes you uncomfortable that you can just export something and other things can start writing to it.
Yeah. It's just like shared global.
And by the way, you should, we know that globals are bad.
Yeah.
And this is just another use of globals.
Yeah. And like even in React is the same way, right? Where you have context that doesn't have its state set up until like you create it, and then you wrap the app in a provider and called React.render. And so again, the state lives inside the context of an application. So when React gets rid of it, it can reset or throw away the state. But with SWR, it's like literally like a const cache equals hash, and you just go to town on it. Yeah. And then, oh, by the way, when you write a test, like you have to reset it because it's a global that's not getting thrown away. But no, it was more like I kind of want to try that next time, because this is the thing. There's a middle ground between going all in on like React context state and doing this global thing, which would be like having another layer outside of the thing that is your application that calls React DOM.render, but also maybe sets up a DI system for you. But like we don't have that. Who's got time for that, right? So I think it would be more as an interesting thing, because when we try to do this useResource hook, where it's like I want to have like useResource post 1 and get back a post that I can optimistically update, that I can call .save on, that I can call destroy on, and if I fetch another payload somewhere that has post 1 in it, I can update this reference immediately. And because we were putting all this in React context, it was getting really hard and confusing about managing re-renders and how to do all that. So I think it would be a lot easier if we just took the approach that SWR takes.
So with SWR, there's no provider or anything like that.
There's no provider. No, no, that's great. I was like, oh, cool. I was like, oh, I know what's happening. Because like you import use SWR, and you use the SWR, you pass in API endpoint like /API/users, and then you get the users back. It gives you a loading state, then you get the data, you do it, you navigate away, and then you come back to this component, and it's there immediately. And I'm like, whoa. I didn't wrap anything in a provider. How is this hook call from an isolated component where is it getting data from that already existed? It only lives in this component. It's a function that got thrown away. So that's where it's a little weird, but it's also kind of magical and cool. We could make it not so magical. It's more just about not having to put, if you have some state that you just want to manage yourself, maybe you don't have to put it in a React context. Maybe you can just do your own thing. And we could do it our way, where we would have some semblance of a system that is like cleaning up after itself, right?
Yeah.
Or we call new cache within a function that also calls React render, so we can clean it up easily or whatever. But yeah, just kind of interesting, to think about that.
Yeah. I feel less guilty about this than I think you do.
I feel really guilty about it, or I just feel like it's you're just going to get into trouble if you can just import things and start like messing with it.
Yeah,
it's like an import. It's like the import shouldn't change based on where I am in the required tree. Maybe it's just hangover from like
it's a global
JS days or something. I don't know.
I mean, it's a global, and we've all been bitten by globals.
Yes,
so I can see that. I'd be worried that if we started using a global for this stuff, then we'd start coming up with all these crazy callbacks, like on data change because
tell React to re-render.
Yeah, something like that, where we need insight into what's going on, and we have to expose it. So I think there's something nice about the consumer provider thing, where data flows up to the provider re-renders its children with new data.
It's interesting, though. I think we should maybe look at the code for use SWR and actually spend some time, because I usually like to treat these things like a black box. You know me, I like to do that because I feel like it's a good way to learn it. But like, I'm starting to think maybe I should get more comfortable like diving into the code and stuff.
Yeah. Also, too, like I don't think you should feel guilty about using a global.
No. It's for sure. It's more like what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought.
Diving into the code.
Before that, I was just saying. Well, where I was going with it was saying that I wanted to talk about SWR a little bit, because like the parts that are annoying that I would like to abstract are this come back to this global identity. Oh, right. That's what I was going to say. So it's not so much about that. And the provider consumer pattern is amazing. No question. It's it's state for a scope subtree of your UI hierarchy. But the question that we always come back to is, we talk about this in podcasts, because server side state means global identity or whatever, right? Implies global identity. So the question is,
it's not a subtree. I'll just
exactly. Is it even UI state, right? That's really the question. If you make a fetch to /post/1 and you want to cache that response, is that UI state? I don't know if it is. If you threw away the UI, would you still have it? Yeah, you would. It's like the latest version of post 1.
It's still valid.
Exactly. So that's why I'm starting to think like the provider consumer stuff is good for like UI state. Like if you're in a wizard and you have like steps that you want to make available to everyone, that's very much tied to your UI at that point in time. Whereas the stuff from the back end is like, and people say that. I've never used Redux before in an production app. I've played around with it. People say that's what people use Redux for. That's actually why Redux took off, because people needed a place for this stuff, because it doesn't make sense for it to just disappear when you close that page. When you navigate away, you don't want to just lose post 1. We already fetched it, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe that's the rule, which is like, if it's not UI state, then we need some more established patterns for where to put this stuff outside of the UI, which is like a service and Ember. And a provider and consumer to some extent, but that's really even still tied to like rendering. And where we ran into the issues was like trying to re-render things when those things changed. So that comes back to like why this is hard, because it's like, how does the use SWR hook know to notify that this thing has changed when this cache over here has changed? How does it actually do that?
Do you know?
Because it's not calling set state. No, I haven't. Because it's not, but it can't be just calling set state, I think. Well,
do you pass in a setter at all? How do you?
No, but it's a hook, so you can use other hooks in it. So
Okay, so maybe the use
Maybe they
SWR
use-
hook has some callback that it has to its like main cache. So when its main cache change, it can call like set state plus
yeah.
one.
Yeah, something like that.
And maybe as you were saying that, like this isn't UI state. It's like global application state.
Right.
And maybe there's some, be it consumer provider or whatever, some hook, but there is a way to link these two things together so you can get the UI re-rendering when the global store changes.
Yeah, I think this is what Redux does. I just don't know how it does it. We just have to look at the code, I think. I think it would be helpful to us, but
Yep.
yeah, I don't think Redux puts its state in a consumer in a context. I don't think. I think it's outside of the React tree.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. But it definitely knows it definitely has a mechanism for telling the tree to re-render when the state changes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
the use reducer stuff you do put in a context.
Yeah.
Yes. To get
the re-renders for free. Yeah, exactly.
And as a place to store.
But it's still, that state still goes away, right? When the component disappears. It's like tied to that hook. That usage of the hook.
Well, you have the state in a context, so the component can go away, but the state can,
as long as the provider is still rendered. It's
and the provider is always. I mean,
it's at the root. It's a global.
Right.
Yeah,
right. We say it's a subtree, and that's like one of the. Yeah, that's its design.
It's a cool
but
thing,
not,
but
it's a global. It's
most people just
root
put
thing.
it around the root. Yeah. Cool. Interesting. The SWR live stream was pretty cool. They have an interesting way where you like update the cache. So like you get back, it's like our storefront stuff. It's close to it on the querying side where you use a cache, a URL as the cache key. And it's basically a query cache for you. So
Nice.
If you've already called a get to some URL with a bunch of query params and stuff and someone else calls it, then it'll just return that same data. But they also, in the hook, give you back a mutate function, which you can invoke to update the cache for that key.
For like an optimistic update?
Exactly. So you do like use SWR /user/1 or /to-do/1. You get the to-do as data, and then you get a mutate hook. You render the to-do in the list. Then you make a form. And in the form save handler, you can call mutate and then put the new to-do in there, and it'll update everywhere in the UI. Then you make the save, and then when it comes back, you rewrite it again using the data from the server.
How do you make the save? Is the save like a literal fetch post call?
Yeah. You do it yourself.
So you get mutate to do optimistic. It doesn't have to be used for optimistic, but you can.
Exactly.
And then what do you mutate again in the fetch after the fetch callback?
Exactly.
To do the pessimistic?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. It's kind of cool. It's kind of like Ember Data's default behavior, but decomposed. So you have control over the mutate. Yep. But it's still like a lot of wiring, and I would still like to wrap that up into a little bit of a higher level because SWR doesn't want to make any like judgments about how you fetch data or make mutations. It works with anything that makes AJAX requests, whereas like we're always going to use fetch in an app, so we can just wrap that all up. And also we have the identity stuff too that I want it to just work or whatever. So,
but it seems like at the lowest level, the mutate and the mutate callback would still be there.
Yes. Yep. Totally. It totally would. It's just a little awkward in some parts. There's no connection when you make the post request. You really want something like a to-do.save or to-do.update and then to-do.save. Because you just get a mutate. You just get the
fetch with mutation.
Yeah, exactly. Because they don't even, you can make any post request you want. You get it, right? It's low level. It makes sense, but you want something a little more constrained, I think. Or I want something more constrained.
Yeah, I know. I mean, me too, right? But I think the trap here is like now, especially with the identity stuff, you now have to have like an API format and you have to adhere to this, and there has to be a way to have, how do you like cross-link identity?
Yep. In a list versus a single object.
And I think these are things that Ember Data got right, and I also think these are the things that make Ember Data so frustrating.
Right.
So
Right. No, I think what would happen, we would put the restraints on ourselves a little bit and wait and extract instead of trying up front. Because I'm like, I know it. I see it already. I know exactly what I want. I've done storefront and Ember data. The rough edges, we can actually smooth them out because this stuff is so low level. But I think it would be better to wait and see like, oh, every time I save something, I have to call mutate, pass in the optimistic thing, pass in a false so that mutate doesn't try to revalidate on its own. Then I make a post request, and in the callback, I check if we're still mounted. Then I'll go ahead and mute. So it's all this stuff, and I'm like, this is where you want. This is where it's like it's not UI state. It's like outside of it, and it's just taking care of those state transitions on your own. And if you care about the updates, you can get them. So that's where it's like it's a lot of boilerplate, and I think we would extract something pretty soon, but it would be something that'd be easier to change and easier to throw away,
Nice.
than a public library.
useResource next week.
Exactly. No, I'm telling you, man, I know it. I know what it needs to be. But it would be fun if we were working on something. That's the thing. We need a real thing. Because I was doing this for a to-do app, and I'm like, this is not justified. There's like one form, and it's fine.
Yeah.
If we had a real app, it would be cool, because I think there would be a real justification for extracting something like useResource.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah. All right, how we do on time?
I have no idea because I don't have a little. When we're in the office, I got a little monitor with the total time, and
we're at an hour. Dude, I miss the office, man. I miss it.
You can still go in.
I can, but I think the building says like you're really not supposed to anymore. I went
really?
I went last Monday. I walked to there, and there's no one there, so I felt okay about doing it. But on the door, they were like, they had a new message that was basically like only people who have to be here, like service people and cleaners and stuff like that, should really be inside.
I mean, if you're not going to go, then we should not be
paying for it.
It's I don't know. But it's it's worth paying for to not have it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's a really good office.
Yeah, totally. Yep. Cool, man.
Nice.
All right, well, I guess I will see you online tomorrow, living the same day over and over again.
Yep. All right, see ya.
Cool, man. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next week. Hope you're staying safe and healthy and happy and everything as you can. Bye.